From the very beginning of the campaign in the east, Germany captured vast territories of the Soviet Union and launched Operation Typhoon, aimed at seizing Moscow. But far to the south, in the rear of the German advance, the unconquered Crimean Peninsula remained, turning into a new and unexpected threat to the entire war effort against the USSR. Let us take a look at the Battle of Crimea and the Siege of Sevastopol from the German perspective. When Operation Barbarossa began in June 1941, the capture of Crimea and Sevastopol was not even part of Germany's original plans. It was assumed that once the major Soviet cities fell, the Soviet Union would simply collapse. However, Hitler and the Wehrmacht High Command were forced to revise their plans after Soviet long-range bombers raided the Romanian oil fields at Ploiești. Germany lost 11,000 tons of oil, and the threat of further bombing only increased. Romanian oil and petroleum products were, in essence, the only major fuel source for the German, Hungarian, and Romanian armies. They were an invaluable resource and a decisive factor in the success of the entire Eastern campaign. Thus, the question of whether to capture Crimea was settled. Immediately after the first air raid on Ploiești, Adolf Hitler issued a new directive calling not only for the conquest of Crimea, but for it to be accomplished as quickly as possible. The Wehrmacht High Command developed a detailed operational plan. German forces under Erich von Manstein, together with their Romanian allies, were ordered to break through the Perekop Isthmus and, advancing along the main roads, rapidly defeat the Red Army's main forces in the region before reaching Kerch and Sevastopol, the largest Soviet naval base on the Black Sea. Approximately 200,000 infantrymen took part in the operation, supported by more than 1,000 aircraft. Yet despite the importance Hitler attached to Crimea, preparations were simultaneously underway for the far more significant Battle of Moscow, which consumed the bulk of Germany's resources. As a result, Manstein did not receive armored formations. In this regard, he had to rely primarily on Romanian forces, equipped with roughly 150 light tanks. On September 26, Germany launched the first phase of the Crimean campaign. After brief but difficult fighting, the Wehrmacht pushed the Red Army back from the isthmus to the Ishun defensive positions. Because of the massive offensive toward Moscow, attention was focused on events near the Soviet capital. Consequently, the next advance into the peninsula resumed only on October 18th. For 5 days, heavy fighting continued, with German forces gradually pressing back Soviet troops. Despite reinforcements and counterattacks by the Red Army, Manstein committed fresh infantry divisions and on October 28 broke through the Ishun positions. This local breakthrough effectively determined the fate of most of the peninsula. With numerical superiority, the Germans continued their advance, preventing Soviet forces from consolidating new defensive lines. The Wehrmacht rapidly captured territory until it reached Sevastopol and the Kerch Peninsula. At these lines, the Red Army intended to halt the German advance. However, Manstein anticipated attempts to hold the narrowest sectors of the front. Romanian and German forces denied the Red Army any respite, and by November 16th, after 10 days of fighting, Soviet troops were driven toward the easternmost part of Crimea. Germany could now focus on capturing the last stronghold on the peninsula, Sevastopol. Fighting around Sevastopol had begun in late October, and within weeks forward German units had encircled the city from land. On November 11th, with the arrival of the main forces of the German 11th Army, combat erupted along the entire perimeter. After 10 days, the attackers had made only minor penetrations into the outer defensive belt, and the battle paused. On November 21st, following heavy fire from coastal batteries and Soviet naval artillery, the Wehrmacht halted its assault. At this stage, Germany clearly understood that although the city was surrounded on 3 sides, Sevastopol still had access via the Black Sea. Neither Germany nor Romania possessed the naval strength to cut this supply route or challenge the Soviet Black Sea fleet. The only hope lay with the Luftwaffe and a renewed assault on the city. Manstein began preparing for a second assault. Originally planned for November 27th, the attack was delayed due to weather conditions and partisan activity, which by mid-November had disabled at least half of the army's horse-drawn and motor transport, as well as 4 out of 5 available locomotives serving the 11th Army. The assault finally began on December 17th. After massive artillery preparation, German units attacked in the northern sector. Only 2 infantry divisions managed to break through Soviet positions. Elsewhere, any German advances came at enormous cost. A week into the assault, despite heavy casualties, many believed Sevastopol would soon fall. However, constant fire from Soviet coastal forts and field artillery gradually exhausted the offensive capability of the 11th Army. The forts posed such a formidable obstacle that German soldiers gave them nicknames, which even appeared in official documents, such as Fort Stalin, Fort Molotov, Siberia, Cheka, and GPU. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union launched a large amphibious operation east of Sevastopol. On December 26, Red Army forces landed on the Crimean Peninsula. The Kerch garrison failed to repel the numerically superior attackers and, despite Manstein's order to hold positions, withdrew, abandoning heavy equipment but avoiding encirclement. For this decision, General Hans von Sponeck was arrested and ultimately executed. At first glance distant from Sevastopol, the landing nevertheless threatened Manstein's entire 11th Army should the Soviets seize the vital Jankoy to Simferopol railway line. German forces were forced to suspend the assault on Sevastopol and redeploy troops to contain the landing. Using their air superiority, they inflicted losses 4 times greater than their own and halted the Soviet advance into Crimea. Unexpectedly, the Soviet Navy launched another landing, this time at Yevpatoria. Only a single battalion of naval infantry came ashore, but aided by an uprising in the city, this force temporarily drove out Romanian troops. German reserves arriving days later quickly crushed the enemy and retook the city. From February to April, the Red Army made 3 attempts to reverse the situation in Crimea, suffering approximately 110,000 casualties. With the arrival of spring, and after Germany's setback at Moscow, Hitler shifted his strategic focus to Stalingrad and the Caucasus oil fields. It became clear that complete control of Crimea was essential for success. Thus, Operation Trappenjagd, Bustard Hunt, was launched. In early April, reinforcements began arriving for Manstein's 11th Army. For the first time in the Crimean campaign, it received a full panzer division, equipped with 180 Czech-built medium tanks. Strengthened with armor and aircraft, the 11th Army and its Romanian allies rapidly advanced toward Kerch, pushing Soviet forces back. Within a week, outflanking the main Soviet forces from the south, the Germans achieved a decisive breakthrough, prompting a Red Army retreat order. The following day, the Wehrmacht occupied Kerch. Soviet troops unable to evacuate retreated into the Ajimushkai quarries. Manstein now aimed to finally conclude the prolonged Crimean campaign by capturing Sevastopol. This time, preparations were thorough. The 11th Army received additional infantry regiments, increased air support, and most importantly, massive artillery reinforcements. Artillery had previously slowed German progress. Now, Manstein ensured unprecedented firepower. The 300th Independent Tank Battalion, 3 battalions of assault guns, 208 artillery batteries, including 93 heavy and super heavy batteries, and even the massive 800mm Schwerer Gustav railway gun, often referred to as Dora. The final assault began on June 7th. Fierce resistance and counterattacks continued for over a week, but careful preparation, air superiority, and the coordinated assault of all branches gradually turned the tide. The breakthrough came on June 17th. In the south, German troops reached the base of Sapun Ridge. In the north, Fort Stalin and the Mackenzie Heights were captured. By June 20th, German forces had taken positions along Severnaya Bay. German artillery could now shell the harbor, making large-scale reinforcement and resupply by sea impossible. Yet the city still held. The inner defensive ring remained intact, and a frontal assault promised heavy losses. Manstein chose instead to strike the northern flank by crossing Severnaya Bay. The southern shore was heavily fortified, making a landing appear impossible, which is precisely why he relied on surprise. On the night of June 28th to 29th, without preliminary bombardment, advance elements of the German 30th Corps silently crossed the bay in inflatable boats under cover of smoke. They secured a foothold, advanced toward Suzdal Heights, and established another landing near Kilen Balka. The ring tightened. By evening, Sapun Ridge fell, and German artillery began systematically bombarding remaining Soviet positions. Ammunition was running out for the defenders. Vice Admiral Philippe Oktyabrski, commander of the defense, received permission to evacuate. Only a small portion escaped by sea or air. The rest were captured. This marked Germany's victory in the Siege of Sevastopol and the Crimean campaign. For this achievement, Erich von Manstein was promoted to Field Marshal. The victory secured Romania's oil fields, at least temporarily, and set the stage for the next great clash on the Eastern Front, the Battle of Stalingrad. Watch this and other battles from the German perspective. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Like the video and let us know which battle to cover next. See you soon.